the water's fine, homie, jump into the deep end. Sow it, you will reap it. We talking how to start it, how to grow it, how to keep it. Take a deep breath. You are now rocking with Founder Secret.
Today, we got Jeff Harrington, today's principal engineer at Microsoft. He's one of our closest friends. Started a company. We're going to talk all about the ups, the downs, all the fun. Hopefully some laughs. There will be some laughs today. But Jeff, welcome to Founder Secrets.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here. Every day I look at the Founder Secrets magnet on my fridge. And, you know, today I'm diving into the deep end. The water's fine, homie.
Jazzy Jeff. I love it. All right. So before we start, icebreaker, we're all going to answer. What was the first thing you ever built that made you say, wow, I built that? I'll start, and then Flavia, you go, then Jeff. So when I was 13, I got really into Visual Basic, like VB6. And I remember it was late one night. I may have been 12. I was like 12 or 13, but I built, like, you remember that old Hello Worlds and all that? I guess they still teach that. But I built something, and I remember I wrote some code, and then it built a little GUI window, and it said Hello World on it. And I remember telling my mom, I was like, this is it. Like, this is the coolest thing ever. And I was never a good programmer, still am not. But I just thought that it like set me off on a trajectory around building things, and AI nowadays makes it so much easier and more fun, frankly, because it got less fun after that. But that was the first time that I had wow, that's cool. Like, it wasn't because it was crazy hard. It was just because I typed some things in, and then this output happened. And then I, built little tools to hack into my mom's computer and stuff like that. So it went off from there. But what about you, Flavia?
That's such a testament to Microsoft, by the way, right? The Visual Basic is owned by Microsoft. That's great. You guys ever heard of MIRC, Merck?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
MIRC, yeah.
Classic.
So MIRC had a language of its own called TCL, TCL. You guys heard of that? It's like a scripting language. And I built a thing that just asked trivia questions. And then based on how people... It's like think of it like Slack, right? MIRC is, if folks don't know, it basically looks exactly like Slack with a little less of an interface, and it was 20 or 30 years ago. And it would think of a Slack room. I'm sure they have this where the Slack room just asks you questions like, all right, what's the tallest mountain in the world? And then everybody in the room types as fast as they can, Everest. And then based on who gets it first, it gives you like 3 points, and then you kind of play and you accumulate points. And I got super, super addicted into this trivia and then making one. So I was like, wow, this is so cool. Yeah.
I love that.
I did not know that. That's cool.
Yeah.
What are
it's
you,
so
Jeff?
funny. Well, but just thinking about IRC, it is so funny, like looking at Slack today, how the interface and the interaction, we were doing this when we were 12 with
For free.
And it was
free.
free. Yeah. IRC bots.
They just increased their price.
They did.
Yeah,
I know. I just
exactly.
got the notice. They're adding AI. For what? I don't need AI in Slack. Okay, sorry. Jeff.
Opt out.
Opt
Yeah.
out.
I love these stories. I think mine is, so similar to both of yours. I think mine was, I was probably around 11, I think, and my mom bought me this VTech kind of mini computer. And it was kind of a toy, but it was kind of a real computer. It had no screen. It was just a keyboard with like some switches and buttons, and you had to hook it up to the television. And I would play with it, and it had games and programs on it. But there was a program called Learn Basic on there. And I was like, what is this? And as you can probably guess, it was a program that was interactive that taught you the basic programming language. For the viewers that don't know, this is where Visual Basic comes from. And it's one of the most popular, most famous programming languages of all time. And I sat and I probably spent like 2 hours just like going through this tutorial, and you kind of write basic and then run the programs. And so similar to both of you, I built this kind of question and answer program using basic, just like very basic stuff, ifs and go-tos and what have you. And then I went and fetched my sister, who's a little bit younger than me. And I'm like, here, try this. And, she goes through and she puts in her name, and it's like, hi, Kate, what's your favorite color and stuff? And I was just blown away watching someone use this and being like, I did this on a computer, which of course seems so foreign and interesting. And similar to you, Taylor, I think this kind of was a tipping point that set me on the trajectory that led to computers being a hobby and computer science in college, and now a career in software development. So very similar stories all around.
I love it. And I love talking to Jeff about anything technical because you have that almost like professor, but a good professor ability to explain things that are complicated in this calm, insightful way that is easy to approach and understand. But at the same time, I actually trust the things you're saying because, a very kind of engineering mind, right? So you're not just like talking and making these things up, like you actually have built things. And today you're at Microsoft, but you've been all over the place, from publishing, started a company, which we're going to talk about today, SoundCloud, all different size companies, different types of roles. Was it always the goal when you were 12 sitting in the room to be, in all these varied paths, or did you have an idea back then, or you just ended up here?
Yeah, that's a great question. And of course, hindsight's 2020. So I could probably come up with this great narrative that was like, oh, I was on this path and, oh, I'm trying to collect skills. And I don't really think I was that smart or clever. I think at every junction, I was just following my interests and matching those with the opportunities that were around me. And so out of school, I just wanted someone to pay me to program computers like that. I couldn't believe that was going to happen and that was like a job. The movie Office Space, it's about these programmers who hate their jobs and they hate their bosses and they're just like so unhappy. And I watched it and I'm like, that's amazing. Their lives are amazing. They all they do is write code all day and they have lunch with their friends and they can hit on Jennifer Aniston at the Chili's. What an awesome life. And the point of the movie went right over me, but I was just so excited to just be able to play with computers and write code and get paid for it. And so out of college, I just took the first job I was offered, which was at Allstate Financial. And that kind of set me down the first 6 years of my career, which was corporate software development in C# and ASP.NET. And I just really enjoyed it. It was just so cool to work on things for huge corporations. I worked on annuity systems at Allstate Financial. I worked on these giant portals used across the country for Allstate. I briefly went to this huge kind of scary conglomerate called ITW. And again, worked on these giant systems for business units across the world. And it was just so cool to have this impact. And yeah, that was kind of my first chapter in my career. And then the next junction, which is when I kind of jumped into the startup world and started my company in 2012. It wasn't this grand plan. It was, I was kind of getting bored of kind of working in corporate software development. And around the time, startups were becoming kind of cool. If you think back to 2012, this is when mobile kind of hit its prime and Instagram was becoming a thing and Uber was becoming a thing. And at the same time, in the software development world, open source was becoming more established. GitHub, which, for the viewers who don't know, GitHub became kind of this revolution for hosting code and kind of having social coding, as they called it. That became kind of a new thing, and Ruby on Rails was becoming this new technology. And that's where my interest was. And I wanted to move into that world. And as we can maybe talk about, an opportunity arose where I found someone who was interested in starting a venture. And so went ahead and made the leap and did that. And that set me into my second chapter, which was the startup world for the next 12 years. And that ran its course. And now I have now flipped back 12 years later. And now I'm at Microsoft and wouldn't have expected myself to come here. But again, I was kind of more interested in getting back into larger systems. Of course, AI is becoming a huge topic these days. And so I flipped back into corporate software development. So really no major plan. I think, in some ways, maybe I'm ambling, but in other ways, I think I'm just kind of matching up my interests, my talents, and the opportunities around me and just trying to make the most of it.
But do you think the big corporate environment affected how you approach the startup? Like, I know some investors really want to see on the resume, like, oh, this person came from Microsoft or Google and now is doing a startup with just him and his buddy. And some investors, I probably would include myself in this, view that as a negative. Like, oh man, if you like worked at Google for 20 years, like the way things are done at a startup is probably so foreign to you that it's not going to work out. Which, I'm wrong all the time about that. So I'm curious kind of how you fall on that experience, how it informed your approach to startup, and what do you think of that?
Yeah, no, I think that that's a fair assessment, and I think it's rooted in reality. I think in some ways it's a little outdated. Back in the 2010s and early 2000s, this was all new, like writing software really quickly, using agile methodologies and things like that. Like it was all so new back then that there just weren't good practices across corporate software development. And they didn't know how to manage. You didn't really know how to build teams back then. And so in the old days, I think software development at corporations was kind of like you're in like your little lane, you do one little thing, and you don't really get a lot of deep experience. Where, yeah, definitely in the startup world and even in kind of just like growth tech companies, you just get so much more deep experience. You get so much more responsibility. However, I will say, being at Microsoft lately, I am surprised at, how you can still get a lot of good experience at a larger company these days. I think we've kind of figured out how to manage resources, how to put teams together. I think you're still going to have a more narrow lane than you would have at a startup.
Wait, can you just say, what do you mean by that? What's the way to build a good team? What have they figured out? What have we figured out that we didn't know 20 years ago?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, today we understand that we can have an engineer do more than just like databases. Like in the early days, you had kind of your database person, your DBA. And I don't think we need that anymore, right? Like we can have a software engineer who understands how to data model and set up the database and run queries and do testing and things like that. Where I remember there were like database people and then there were QA people, and we didn't really have front end, back end, but you just had like very strict roles. And I think now we understand that there's full stack software engineers or even the back end engineers. They've kind of expanded these days into doing more DevOps stuff, more kind of like operational, almost get into like what systems administrators used to be. Like systems administrator was like such a role back in the day. And now it's just like so different. People are expanding what they kind of focus on. And so, yeah, I think, these days you can still have a wider impact even at a larger company. And so I think the VCs out there and these other people who may look at a large company, Microsoft, Capital One, something like that, it may not be fair to completely write them off anymore because they're probably still responsible for an application or projects, things that are still going to be pretty relevant. What they may not be used to is the pace. I think the pace is obviously always going to be different, and maybe like, the urgency sometimes. So yeah, I think that's kind of the views I have these days.
It's so interesting because I think that some parts of the economy and some parts of tech have gone so much into the value is specialization. So it is what you're talking about. You should have gone into DBA, but don't just be a database administrator. Like you only work on these types of queries or in this industry or these really, really hard challenges. And now hearing you say that, it does make sense. Like we've kind of, especially with AI now, we've gone way the other direction almost, where you're right, where one person might be doing the task of 4 people or 5 people from before. Maybe they don't do it as well, or maybe they do because of AI or because of how good the tools have gotten. So it is interesting to hear that, like from a technical person's perspective.
Yeah. And I'll say like AI, it's even having me question now, like, is it better to continue to be a generalist or is it actually better to specialize? Like which jobs are the AI going to take first? Like the full stack people or like the deeply, like the super high output front end engineer? Like, are they going to be replaced? Cause it's like, okay, we'll have like our back end engineer use AI to do the front end and it'll be good enough. Or is it the more general person who doesn't go super deep in any one area that the AI can go deep enough to where it's like, oh, we don't need a generalist. We need a specialist to really help us get out of the weeds sometimes. That's kind of an open question that I have.
I think we all have. All right. So so you're in Chicago. You started a business with two friends in the restaurant space. What sparked the idea? What was the idea behind Cardoona?
Yeah. Well, I'll say we actually didn't start as friends, which like maybe we can go
You were enemies.
into that. We were enemies. Yeah. No, it's kind of interesting. We didn't start as friends. We actually were introduced and started as business partners. I was working at Tribune at the time in Chicago, and I actually had built my own food truck web app to track food trucks in Chicago. It was kind of like a big trend. You know, it's different than it is in New York. In Chicago, you couldn't have a food truck like sit in one spot. They were kind of always moving around. And if you were interested in going one, you really had to be on top of it. And this annoyed me. So I built this web app that you could create an account, put where you lived, where you worked, what food trucks were in your area that you were interested in. And then it would just ping you if it knew that the food truck was going to be near you that day. So you can know about it ahead of time. Because you would sometimes check Twitter and they're like, oh, we're over here now. But if you walked there, by the time you got there, they would move and you'd miss out on the meatballs or the empanadas or whatever. And so I built this web app, let people at Tribune know about it because there were so many good food trucks around there. And, you know, some people started using it. And soon after, one of my colleagues, who was actually quite senior than me, she was more senior, she was the head of QA, puts this random meeting on my calendar on a Thursday. And I was like, what is this about? Oh no. Like I check in with the people I'm working with. I even like reached out to some of the engineers in India who we had. I'm like, hey, is everything okay QA wise? And like, it's like 8:00 where they are. Like one of them replied back. They're like, yeah, everything's fine. And I'm like, I don't know why she's meeting with me, but she wanted to meet with me to introduce me to an entrepreneur that she knew that had started a company in Canada, moved back to Chicago and needed help implementing some software. She's like, would you agree to meet with this person? And I said, sure. And I met with them and it turned out to be her son. And it was like, okay, this entrepreneur, but you know,
Didn't mention that.
She didn't say that.
She didn't mention it. And it was one of the first things he said. So his name's Colin Robertson. And he's like, so if you haven't figured out, Liz is my mom. And I'm like, nope, I didn't realize that, but that's okay.
It looks so similar.
It's scary. If you ever see Colin's mom, she looks like she's 40 and she has like a 30-year-old son. So, but in any case, like I still met with him and, you know, heard his story and, you know, he had started a competitor to Grubhub in Canada and contracted out all the development and really wanted to get the software up and running. Now that he had moved back to Chicago and asked me if I'd take a look at it and help him implement it. I took a look. I had to be the bearer of bad news that the software was not finished. It was not even close to being ready. I could help him, but I'm like, man, this is going to be tough for you. You're in Chicago. That's where Grubhub was founded, was in Chicago, and he wanted to compete with Grubhub. And I'm like, hey man, like, I don't know if this is going to be the greatest idea and I don't know if I can really help you. And he's like, oh man. And this was over like a couple weeks where we kind of going back and forth and discussing things. And he's like, well, if you were in my shoes, like, what would you do? And I was like, well, like you've built up some restaurant contacts. You kind of know some people, you might know some things. Like maybe you go interview these operators and these owners and figure out like what services or what problems they need solved by technology. And no joke, he said, quit your job, join me, and we'll go figure out what that is. And it was very bold. And I'm a little bit older than him. And it was a bold sale to be like, come and join me. Let's do this. And he just got me at the right time. Like I said, this was kind of like during an era where kind of open source and startups were becoming a thing. And I had saved up some money. And I said, sure, why not? I'll quit my job. I'm going to spend the summer with you. We'll figure this out. We joined a startup accelerator in Chicago and spent the summer basically trying to find a business that we could build using kind of the foundation that Colin had built in kind of the restaurant space. And through the accelerator program that we were in and through the summer that we did interviewing all these restaurants, we discovered that there was an actual kind of pretty sizable problem with order management, vendor management, and payment processing for back of the house of restaurants. That it was 2012 and all of it was done via clipboards and telephone. They would order one thing, two other things would show up that they didn't order, and they didn't even get the original thing that they ordered. And they have no restitution. They have no paper trail to show that this was even there. And so we said, let's modernize this. Let's see if we can make this an easier process for them, give them some more visibility into their prices, into their trends, all that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, at the end of the summer, we ended up launching our first, and we called the company Cardoona, which Cardoona was a name we kind of made up. It's based on an artichoke, and I believe it's an Italian artichoke called the cardoon. And, back in the early startup days, you just kind of added a vowel to everything to make it sound kind of startup-y, like squidoo or Hulu or, whatever, or Hooli, shout out to HBO. And so we saw Cardoon and we're like, let's just add an A, Cardoona. And it stuck. It was perfect because chefs heard it and they kind of understood like where it came from. And our logo was a really good mark. It was like a little Cardoona flower or a little artichoke flower. And so, yeah, we launched our first product at the end of the summer, and one of our investors / partners, Maggie, joined us full time, and we started trying to grow the business. And we got some connections with some restaurant partners in Chicago. A network of bars started using us, and yeah, it was an incredible ride. And it all kind of started with Colin making the bold ask, us joining the accelerator program in Chicago, which was huge. And then, yeah, having our third co-founder come on and us kind of giving it a good college try there.
So what happened?
Yeah. So this is, I guess the age old, how do all companies fail, right? They run out of money. There's no money left.
I thought the number one reason they fail is because the co-founders don't get along, which is not true in your case. You guys still get along great.
Yeah, not true in my case. Yeah, and that's kind of interesting, and I want your guys' opinion on it because I find it interesting that a lot of people assume we were friends first and then like, oh, let's start this company. We started just truly as these business partners, and then through that became friends. And so our relationship started in a very formal setting and then was able to kind of attach on this kind of friendship. And a long time ago, someone told me that it is much easier to go that direction than to work with someone first and then become friends with them, rather than the opposite where you become friends and then you have to move into a professional setting. What are your thoughts on that?
I think they're both hard. I think it's very hard either way. Yeah.
Do you guys have examples where you were friends first and went into business with someone?
My very first company, I was friends with the two guys that started it with. I was 19. We started an e-commerce company. We were all 33% owners. We are no longer friends. I had a 50-50 partner in Blackstone. I bought him out after 4 years. We are no longer friends. I think it's unusual. I don't know. What do you think, Flavio? You see a lot more of this.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's like, I mean, if the company's maybe super successful, I could see how, if all was well, you just like continue being best friends. But in the case like you're talking about where like it didn't work, usually it is because there's some dynamic that didn't work. So I think it's a very unique thing you've experienced where you become great friends after the company didn't work.
Yeah, and I think it was going through the harrowing journey of trying to start a company and operate it and then shut it down. I think it really brought us all together, Colin, Maggie, and I. And so, yeah, so what happened, right? So we launched our products, we got a few early customers, and so it was time to scale the business. And so naturally just started going around pitching to investors in Chicago, which like hindsight, maybe that was a little limiting because Chicago is, it's not the bastion for venture capital. It's a Midwest city. This isn't, the cutthroat risk-taking world. And so we perhaps limited ourselves by only looking in Chicago. But yeah, we were pitching to a lot of investors in Chicago and they were a little risk averse. We had a product, we had paying customers, but it just wasn't enough for them. And in hindsight, I do wonder if there was still a little bit of air left over from the financial crisis. So this is 2012, 2013, 2009 wasn't that far away from there. So I wonder if there was a little bit of risk aversion in Chicago there. But every pitch we said, they're like, wow, this seems like a good company. May not be the biggest. However, it seems like you've hit on a problem. Come back to us when you have more. And it's like, okay. And so we had to kind of self-fund for, about a year and change. And when we saw that we couldn't grow it as fast as we needed to, because it's a really slow sales process, we're dealing with one of the oldest industries in existence, restaurants. They have existed since the Middle Ages, and purveyors of food and things, it's been a very relationship-based business. And here we are, kind of the young tech guys coming in. It was really hard to convince people to change. And so we did get to a point where we're like, let's see if we can pivot into something that's a little bit easier to swallow and maybe still add some value. And we took one feature of our software that people really liked, which was just price monitoring. So because we did all the inventory, all the order management, all the vendor management, we had all the prices from all the food purveyors from every restaurant that worked with us. And one little kind of secret of kind of food purveying is that they can kind of gouge you kind of secretly. Let's say you're ordering, you run like a chicken wings restaurant. Someone's going to come in and be like, hey, I can get you the best price on chicken wings in the area. Like, no one's going to beat me. Here you go. And they look at the price and they say, okay, this is pretty good. And chicken wings are like my highest volume thing. I'll do it. I'll sign on with you. And then they go ahead, and now you're also going to buy potatoes from them. You're going to buy all the condiments. You're going to buy all the napkins. You're going to buy all the straws. And then they just like jack up everything else along the way. And sometimes prices spike up, and you're not paying attention to the prices of your ketchup, of your napkins, of your straws, of your onions and stuff like that. You're just looking at your chicken wing price, which is the best. Oh, Johnny's the best. He gets us the best. And so we created a basically email report of, here are your price fluctuations. Hey, this spiked up 10% since the last time we got this. They love this. And we pitched this, and we kind of started selling this as the product. And we started getting a little bit more customers and a little bit faster traction, but it just wasn't fast enough. And we had kind of exceeded our investors' kind of generosity, couldn't raise any more money. And so we just had the tough call to kind of shut things down. We did attempt to sell to the Alinea group. So those that might know, Alinea is a very famous restaurant in Chicago. They were starting to expand into other areas. They were actually working on something that now became Tock, which people might have heard of today. Tock is used by many high-end restaurants to basically sell tickets to dinners. The Alinea group was building this around the same time that we were building Cardoona. And so they were kind of interested in kind of taking on something like this. And they made us an offer. It was so low. It wasn't even worth doing the paperwork for. We're like, no, this isn't going to help us. Like,
How low was it?
It was an order of magnitude lower than what our investors put in. Let's just say that.
Like $10,000.
Yes. And so it was pretty bad. And we were like, this is not even an offer. And they're like, listen, we are probably going to try to build this ourselves anyway. So like, it's not like we are dead in the water without you. Like, you're just going to give us a little bit of a bump. And so we ended up saying no. And yeah, had the tough time of shutting down the company. But, it was like our MBA in the streets. We like learned so much. It was like two years and some change that we operated, and no regrets. And as you all have kind of mentioned, like, we're all so close to this day. Our families and friends who are investors, like, no one has any ill will. It was just like a great time.
Which I think is a real testament to you. Do you think this business could work today? Did somebody end up like creating a pricing restaurant kind of business?
Yes. So it's like maybe every 18 months that somebody sends one of us an email and says, hey, check this out. This is Cardoona. And it was, I think the most recent one, it was maybe a year and a half ago. There was, I forget which startup accelerator, but there was a startup accelerator where someone had basically pitched this idea of kind of like an Amazon for restaurants. So they can just have this portal and they can order things. I think their idea was that you could order across multiple vendors, which like, good luck. But because that was an idea we had as well. But I have yet to hear or see anyone who has really like broken through and like made it. I still think it's like a very relationship heavy business. And there are some big players, there's US Foods, Cisco, Gordon Foods. There's these big players that don't want anyone messing and getting in between the relationships between the restaurants and them, which we were kind of doing. We were kind of becoming middlemen.
How did you get the prices? Did you get their receipts how'd you get the actual prices?
Yeah, good question. So depending on the size of the vendor, it made it more or less difficult. Like we dealt with some cheese purveyors who were super small. And they're just like, yeah, no problem. We'll just like send you an Excel spreadsheet every week. And it's just like, okay, cool. And like, I wrote code to basically parse that and put that in, and that's not a big deal. Other purveyors, like there was like a dairy and creamery one. They're like, could we fax you our prices? And I was like, let me see. And so like back then there was like a digital fax API that someone had built. And I'm like, yeah, let's give this a try. It didn't really work. But with the kind of bigger players like US Foods and Cisco, we just had to do a lot of groveling and a lot of begging. And they had some systems where they could actually just like FTP price lists to us. And so it was very bespoke. It was very akin to what I would end up doing at Cedar at one point, getting healthcare data out of healthcare systems, like very bespoke. Every system's different, very snowflakey. And it's a lot of just data munging, which is the reality of so many companies.
By the way, when you said about investors giving you the feedback of, oh, you're just not, just get a little bit more and then come back. That's such hard feedback because I've both gotten it and received it, or I've both gotten it and given it before. And it's impossible to tell whether the person means like, no, this is a stupid idea, I would never invest. Or if they truly mean it, they're like, oh yeah, they're like, you're very close. Because they don't want to upset you and the founders. So you just don't know, do they even think this is viable or not? And it's really hard to get that honest feedback when you're in it. Certainly investors, I don't think are going to give it to you. It's not in their interest to like make you upset.
We had some advisors that were helping us out. Troy Heinekoff, who's still pretty big in Chicago. He has Math Ventures. And he told us, he's like, listen, no one is ever going to say no. They'll never say no. They'll just say, come back later. Even if the answer is no, it's just no, just come back later.
Especially in the Midwest, I feel like, where people want to be super nice. They really don't want to upset you. Like some guy in Silicon Valley might. So if you were to start a new company today, what do you think you do? What are some like takeaways, some things you do differently or any lessons you carry with you to this day?
One thing that we didn't really face back then was we were starting a company in a space that we really didn't have a lot of domain knowledge in or deep expertise in, or even really like personal connection. Like we really started down this path because that was kind of where Colin started his previous company, which was called Mood Menu, by the way. It didn't really matter, but that was kind of like what anchored us into this space. And, he had built some knowledge and some contacts, but they didn't really end up influencing us with Cardoona. And I think that was maybe potentially why we didn't break through. And so I think one thing that both of us, both Colin and I, have talked about that we realize is if we were to start a company again, like do it in a space or solve a problem that you have some kind of unique knowledge about, or you have some personal connection in. Like I had never really run a restaurant before. I had never really seen like what it takes to deal with like orders. Of course, I interviewed a lot of kitchen managers and restaurant owners during the Cardoona gathering process, but I was literally like starting from scratch. So I'm like, tell me, what's a par level? Okay, par level. This is something any kitchen manager would know what a par level is, or anyone who's even worked at a restaurant. But I had to like take notes and start over. I think that put me at a disadvantage. And really like, what is my unique, value in starting this company where there's things that we all know? I think all of us have kind of unique experiences and perspectives that we can bring to something. Like, one thing that comes to mind immediately is like, Flavio, you were a very good tennis player and you know so much about tennis. It is so impressive how good you are. This is something that I don't have, Taylor doesn't have. There's so many people out there that don't really understand that. You are in such a unique position to see like, what are the problems of like tennis players that are trying to go pro? What are the problems of someone who's trying to up their game? And like, you have a personal connection to it that anything, any kind of company you start related to tennis is already going to have a higher chance of success because of your kind of personal connection and knowledge. And I think that is what one huge takeaway is, if I was to get into something, do it in a space or solve a problem that like I kind of grok and understand and have some kind of unique perspective to bring. And maybe even like some authenticity. I can bring some authenticity to it. That's probably the biggest takeaway I have.
Like
if music. I was to try to do so. Exactly. Music. Yeah. I play guitar and like I've studied music production, and I used to go to a studio every week in Chicago to learn mixing and mastering. It's a great example, Tara. Like, I know more than the average person about these things. And so something music related would be a great area for me to try to solve a problem.
By the way, this reminds me, actually, I got to introduce you to this startup I actually just invested in. That's AI music related. I didn't introduce it to anyway, but I think I partially agree. I do think that you're right about it has to be something that you're really passionate about, like the music idea you just mentioned. I'm not sure that just knowing it is enough. Like, for instance, for tennis, I wouldn't be passionate, about starting a company in that space, because starting a company in a space is different than like playing tennis, And I do think there's a value to being new to a field. Like, if you were really passionate about starting a business in the restaurant space, and you're right, you didn't know anything, I think you would be really excited about learning. And like for me, that was in healthcare, where I ended up learning and more than the people in the industry, just because I was really passionate about it. So I think it's having that fresh perspective can be helpful. But you're right that passion, you just can't, you can't really create. You either have it or not for a certain space. And do you think, I guess, is there anything you'd approach differently today because of AI? Like I was just at a talk where they're like, oh, vertical SaaS is dead. And so let's not build any more vertical SaaS. It's all, agents now. And I know a bunch of friends who have built these companies. Actually, just I was talking to a guy that had spent the last 3 months on Adderall building this thing that would integrate ChatGPT into your Google Suite, Gmail and Calendar, and he just built it. And then like the next week, ChatGPT released an integration with Gmail and Calendar, and it was like, dude, like I completely like destroyed his idea. I'm wondering like how you view building in the age of AI differently.
Like everything, I think our opinions are changing as we learn so much. I try not to get too freaked out about it and just use the tool in the way that's going to help me. So if I were to approach things, obviously I would use AI, like use AI as much as possible. And like maybe even saying use AI isn't like enough. Like more specifically, how would I use AI? First and foremost, like I'm a software engineer, I write code. Absolutely use an AI coding tool. Like it's just like no brainer, like use this. It's going to make you more productive. I use one. It's absolutely the first time I used it, which was at Cedar when we were building a brand new application from the start. It increased my productivity 20% the day I started using it. And it's because like, it's going to kind of fill in the blanks of like, oh, I see where you're going with this. Let me just finish this with you. Or if I'm like, hey, I can't really remember the syntax or what's the idiomatic way to do this, just use it. It's going to increase your speed. But then, yeah, the agents, the agentic view of things, like absolutely lean on that for, I hate to say it, like instead of kind of having like a junior person to kind of do smaller tasks or things like that, try to see if there's an agent that would do it. At Microsoft, and I know other companies are doing this as well, we're experimenting on our teams with basically doing bug fixes using an agentic AI. So instead of writing a ticket, giving it to the junior engineer, like, hey, go fix this. You'll get some experience from it, what have you. Write the ticket, assign it to the AI agent, and then it'll go off and do the bug fix for you.
What is agentic AI? What is an AI agent? How is that different from like ChatGPT or any of these other tools?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. I think, this is kind of like a buzzword that we're talking about. A ChatGPT, it's a chat interface. It's a call and response, right? And, the dream, I think we all have the dream of like AI bots doing all this stuff for us. Like, oh, I'm going to start my company and I'm going to have AI bots writing the software and all this. An agentic AI, or even just like an agent, is basically a specialized little computer program that's going to go off on its own and do kind of a more narrow task using LLM as kind of like the background engine. And so, for instance, like an agent that would be doing code, like the example I just talked about, like writing code, it is a specialized piece of software that you've kind of programmed to read a ticket, take in the ticket's information, figure out a plan, write the code, submit the PR. There was no chat involved. There was no one going in there and saying, hey, could you fix this bug for me? And by the way, like, make sure not to do this. It is going to be almost autonomous and is going to be like an agent on your behalf doing things. And I think this is kind of the big buzzword of the last year is like, okay, we've had these chatbots. Let's put them to work. Let's give them little jobs to do. And I think, in the coding space is where I've had the most experience. It's really becoming very helpful in kind of, bringing down the amount of BS work you need to do. And like I said, we're handing bug tickets off to them. We have some AI agents that are trying to, it's kind of silly. We have AI agents that are noticing problems in production systems and then opening tickets. And then we have AI agents looking at the problems and trying to solve them and then closing the tickets. So I've literally seen an AI create a ticket saying, hey, there's a problem here. And then an AI agent saying, oh, I think we know what to do here. Let's just do this. And then it closes the ticket.
No human involvement.
No human involvement at all.
Well, wait, a human still reviews the pull, like the submission to ensure, new bugs aren't introduced.
Yes. In the coding example, absolutely. Like the end state for the agent is to submit a pull request and say, here's what I've done. And like, it's not always perfect. Like what we always have to kind of measure these things against is the baseline human situation. Like you can't get mad at an AI for making a mistake because we make mistakes all the time. And so, someone on my team he submitted 3 times the same ticket to see how different it would be. And it was different. It was different every time.
Oh, it was.
Yeah.
The agent wrote different response or code for that.
Yes. Where the example I was talking about before was more in an operations standpoint, where like a production system got into an unhealthy state. The AI bot noticed this, created an incident or a ticket to say, hey, this is in an unhealthy state. Someone needs to look at it. And then we have an AI bot take a look at it and be like, ooh, this is probably the resolution for this. I'm going to try this. It tried it. It solved it. Closed the incident. Closed the ticket.
I got to ask. So I think some people are going to listen to this and they're going to think, oh my God, this like AI is coming from my job or AI. And I think that and I'm curious to your perspective, what is unique about code or what is unique about software engineering versus, let's say, the legal space or versus other spaces like that is that there's an unlimited demand for software engineering. Like, in other words, if the agents are helping to do certain tasks, but that really does free up an engineer to do other tasks because there are unlimited things that there's unlimited demand for software. All of us, if we could have it, would have our own personal iOSs running on these devices that are totally customized to exactly what I want. That would be ideal, right? Like that would be amazing to have. I could feed things into an AI. It writes on iOS just for me. So if that's the end result that we could probably never get to, there's an unlimited demand versus something like legal where there's really, hopefully, I pray, not unlimited demand for something like legal. Do you agree with that kind of belief? I'm curious what you think of that.
I totally agree. And I really like your way of looking at it, that it's about demand. And software, it can go infinite, right? We can continue to make as much software as we can. I think my perspective and opinion is that it's probably going to come for some people's jobs in some ways. And I am going to be affected by it and maybe am already starting to be affected by it and don't realize it. But the way I look at it is it's like many innovations that we've seen, and again, this is my opinion, and it's almost like so boring to hear like all these theories on like how it's going to happen. But the perspective I use is like a shovel. There's a shovel, and okay, you need to like dig a hole. And if you need to dig a really big hole, you need like 100 people with shovels kind of digging holes. And it's like ChatGPT and these LLMs and these models came in, and this excavator just came into town. And it's just like, I can now dig this giant hole just so easily. You don't need 100 people anymore. And it's not like we're like, oh no, like we don't, like we love shoveling. Like, some people love shoveling, but it's like, great, now we don't have to shovel. Like we can now focus on another innovation, which is, what are we going to put in the hole? Let's put a bigger foundation in. Let's build bigger buildings. Let's build safer buildings. Let's build fireproof buildings. The 100 people that were digging holes now can focus on bigger and better things. And I love your kind of analogy that it's kind of infinite demand. And so there's going to be infinite innovation that we need. Security is going to be a huger thing. Data centers, operations, all these things. And that's going to create more opportunity for people to pivot and get into other things. So I try not to get too affected by it, but yeah, I think that we're all going to be okay. Knowledge workers are going to be okay. We might have to pivot a little bit, and that's going to be uncomfortable, especially as we get older. But my hope is that we will all pivot into more interesting things that, kind of get us excited, or maybe we can be more creative. So who knows? We'll find out, of course, but maybe we'll look back at this podcast in 10 years and laugh.
And say, oh, how silly we were.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, cool. Well, Jeff, we could go on for hours. We appreciate you, but as we wrap here, we got to get to our hack, our life hack that we can recommend. And I'll start. Have you guys heard of this app called Too Good to Go?
I have not.
No, what's that?
It's an app that partners with pastry shops and in different places, even Whole Foods actually, that have food that goes bad at the end of the day, right? And they have to do something with what's left. And so this app, you pay like a de minimis amount, like $5, and they'll prepare a goodie bag for you full of either pastries or the things that are left at the end of the day. So that for a pastry shop, you might show up at like 3 p.m. and pick up 5 pieces of pastry for $5 because they're left. And they partner with all the different places in New York and actually around the country. So I just used it, and it was like such a great experience.
You used it? What did you get?
I got some pastries, and they were delicious.
For $5?
Yeah. And it even do it with Whole Foods. So you could get like leftover pastries or food from Whole Foods. Like in terms of startup, like trying to make it with like as cheap as possible, I feel like this is like one of the things in the tool set these days. If you're living
was it it was $5 for the pastries, or is $5 plus the cost of the pastries?
No, it's $5 and you get like a full bag. And,
oh, wow.
And that's it. Like it's like it's almost free. I think they only make it a price so there's a little bit of skin in the game demand, so not everybody books it and nobody shows up. So it's a de minimis sort of amount compared to what it would cost.
And you go pick it up, or is it delivered?
You go pick it up. I don't think they deliver it.
Okay. Nice.
Wow.
And then you feel good. You feel good, like you're saving.
You save the world.
Honestly, when you're there, like you kind of help. Like you're like discovering new places. You might actually buy other things from them in the future, so it works out for the pastry shop or restaurant that you wouldn't have gone otherwise.
All right, I have one that I learned last night. So I've been using. My hack every week has been new ways of using ChatGPT, and we will continue that trend. So this is what I learned last night. I think it's a genius one. You go to a restaurant, you see the wine list, and you want a bottle of wine. You take a picture of it, send it to ChatGPT, and say, which of these are good deals? And then it shows you the retail price versus how much is the wine price versus what's on there. And then you can also tell it, we're looking for a flavorful whatever. And then it'll analyze the whole thing, give you a short list of, okay, I think you should pick this one. It's $1.30. That's a good deal because this is the retail price or the wine store price. And somebody told me that at an event last night. And I thought, oh, that's a great, I'm all for finding new ways of using ChatGPT or, these LLMs in general. So that's mine. Next time you're at a restaurant, I guess you can do it with cocktails and things too. You can do it with a bourbon list or even with a food list, right? You could take a picture of the food list and then say, ooh, that steak is really mispriced, right? That's a good deal compared to, the Wagyu. Jeff, the
restaurant theme continues. What about you, Jeff?
Theme continues.
Yeah, I didn't think about AIs coming for sommeliers, but I guess you're right.
Flavia's first job.
Oh, right.
Or his second job?
That's true.
What about you,
Wow.
Jeff?
So I came armed with 3 different life hacks, depending on what you guys are going to say. And there's clearly a theme here. So I'm going to tell you about the life hack that my wife actually said I should say on the podcast. So this is good. And it is restaurant based and it's not technical, but it is a tip I have. And when I've shared this tip, it seems to have helped some people. So let's say we're doing, okay, Taylor, we've got the sommelier ChatGPT. We figured the bottle of wine out. Now we're looking at the menu and it's a small plates restaurant. And they come over and they're like, oh, we do everything family style. Just order a bunch of plates for the table. This is like, thanks. Like you've given us now a problem to solve because there's 5 of us or there's 6 of us or there's 4 of us. And now you have to figure out how much do we order? And of course, you ask the waiter, like, how many per person should we get? And what is
depends
their
on how
incentive?
hungry you are.
Yeah. It depends on how hungry you are. And their incentive is obviously to put a little bit more in there. And so how do you figure out how many plates to order? And this is something I learned back in the food truck days. And it's, you got to figure out what price point are they expecting every individual to hit? There is a number. They're trying to cover the table. There is a price that they want you to get per person. And the way you figure this out is every small place restaurant is going to have a set of entrees. And you have to look at the entrees and find the most basic standard entree. Usually there's a burger or a roast chicken or just like a pork chop and vegetables. And you look at however much that costs. And that you multiply that by the number of people, and that is your total bill. And now you need to just fill the small plates up to get to that number. So if the regular entree is, let's say, $30, and you see like, oh, they got these prawns for $6 and they got these things for $8. 2 of those is not going to be enough for one person because they're trying to get you up to that $30. But then if there's like, oh, we've got this tartare thing that's $18 and this other thing that's $12 and then a salad that's $8. No, that's too much for one person because you've exceeded the price point. This has been proven, tried and true, tested out in the wild. This is your way to figure out how many small plates to order and how not to over order or under order.
So you're aiming for that $30 is the net.
Aim for the most regular standard entree price per person, and it won't steer you wrong.
It's a great hack.
Oh, wow.
This turned into a restaurant theme episode.
I kind of love that. Yeah, it worked out.
I love it. Jeff, where can people find you if they maybe they have some new idea they want to pitch you?
You can hit me up. Am I going to give my email address out on the...
You put your LinkedIn or whatever you want.
Yeah, you can hit LinkedIn.
Twitter.
I'm Jeffrey Harrington on LinkedIn. You'll find me, principal engineer at Microsoft. I guess you can hit me up on Instagram too, slide into the DMs. I am married though, so don't get any ideas. I think you can hit me up there. I check my LinkedIn all the time. I'm pretty active on there. So if you send me a message, I will see it and I will reply.
What a pleasure. This is a blast.
Thanks
for
so
coming
much.
on.
Thank you guys. Been such an honor. Love the pod. Love you guys. Good luck with everything.
Dude.
Thank you for rocking with the homies. Taylor, Trusty, and Flavio. Seize the day, own it. Until next time, hold it down, hold it down. Hey.